Hello, and welcome to Exploring Journalism's Future, a podcast powered by the Institute for Media and Public Trust at Fresno State. I'm Professor Betsy Hayes, faculty in the Department of Media, Communications, and Journalism here at the university. From analyzing existing models to discovering innovative ones, from crafting content strategies to optimizing distribution, and everything in between. We'll connect you with a diverse array of experts and advocates dedicated to revitalizing and fortifying one of the world's most vital industries. Today, we are very happy to have with us Rusty Coates. Rusty is the Executive Director of Journalism Funding Partners. He is also a longtime journalist who has played major roles in several newspaper companies. Welcome, Rusty.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
Appreciate your time. So let's just start with a little bit of background about you. Obviously, now you're an Executive Director of Journalism Funding Partners. But how do we get there?
We got on this road in eighth grade when I wrote for the student newspaper, and then I had the luck of having a terrific high school journalism advisor. He was a very young teacher and very passionate about journalism and English, and he actually came to my rescue when I wrote a column about our high school had brought in a guest speaker for one of those big convening things where they round everyone up in the gymnasium. And the speaker invited us to continue the conversation later. It was all about, don't do drugs and be a good person and all that. And he was very dynamic. And so my girlfriend and I went to the after event, and it turned out to be at an evangelical church, and it was a revival. And there was a lot of devil in AC/DC and things like that. This is a long way around to say I wrote a column about it and took them all to task, the school, the speaker, and they were very unhappy about that, wanted to be suspended, wanted to have a retraction written. And my high school advisor reminded them that there was something called the First Amendment, and that really came in handy. And then a few months later, I won the High School Journalist of the Year in Southern Indiana from the Louisville Courier-Journal, which paid for my first year in college. And I'm a first-year college in my family. So that's how I got started. Went to Indiana University and wrote for the Indiana Daily Student throughout, and held various editor roles. Did internships in my hometown of Jeffersonville, Indiana, then Bangor, Maine. There was a woman involved that didn't work out. And then in Miami, Florida. And then my first job out of college was a night cops reporter in Evansville, Indiana. Then followed the Grateful Dead to the West Coast, and got a job at the Modesto Bee. Interviewed at all of the bees while I was out there, and was a reporter then, and a columnist. I was one of two Gen X columnists in the McClatchy News Service Wire, back when we thought anyone gave a damn about Gen X. There was
I still believe we're important, though. But
just a brief moment. That's why we have to put Eddie Vedder in bubble wrap. Um, and then I got interested in digital because a lot was starting to change, and that was the mid '90s. And convinced my publisher, Orge Quarles, who is now my board chair. He was our publisher, that we needed to go online, and he, even despite my protests, gave me the job of doing that because I told him I was a reporter and reporters don't really do anything. Um, and he said he wanted us online in 8 weeks because the Sacramento Bee was going to be online in 10. And I made the deadline, and then ran SacBee.com. And then when McClatchy bought Minneapolis, I ran StarTribune.com, and then did consulting with Frank Maggot Associates, which works with a lot of media companies on audience, mostly television station, and then got back into operations and became a corporate with Media General. I ran TBO and then went to corporate with them. Then ran digital news and marketing for EW Scripps on the newspaper side. And then my wife and I started a consultancy and ran that for 11 years, where we worked with all kinds of media companies, from public media to big national media companies, all business models. And and I ran the Local Media Consortium, which is a collective of media companies that have negotiated contracts with Google and Facebook and Monster and others for good rates on ads. And and then during COVID, when there's not a lot of consulting work, I had the epiphany. And if you did COVID without a major epiphany, you did it wrong. Mine was at the LMC. We bragged rightfully that we were sending $100 million a year back to local news through programmatic advertising and other things. And during COVID, the epiphany was I don't think any of that money actually went to the newsrooms.
Mm.
I think it went to the ownership structures. I think it went to stave off the bottom, help the bottom line. And I wanted this act of my life to be something where I was contributing directly to newsrooms because that's where I started. My love affair with the industry began. So thankfully, the JFP job came open and caught my eye. I applied, and here I am now.
Oh, I love it. Which is a beautiful segue to the main topic, which of course is the future of journalism, and kind of obviously want to start with the role of philanthropy in supporting local journalism. And I guess why is philanthropic support increasingly important for local journalism? What is causing that shift?
Well, I think the shift really begins at the funder level. If you go down the rabbit hole, I mean, the newsroom is kind of obvious. You know, they've had some economic challenges, and they've made cuts to areas that really are about the community's well-being, and in favor, sometimes in favor of things that are more lucrative. Because you know, I did a whole series on homelessness. I was part of a team in Modesto on the 50th anniversary of the publishing of Grapes of Wrath. And we did a whole series of that on that, which published throughout the Christmas season. Unfortunately for our advertisers, because they were not very happy about that. And so covering homelessness is not very financially appealing. The car dealers backed out. Covering the giants, very economically appealing. A lot of news organizations have had to cut some of the areas that are very important to a community's well-being. And funders increasingly are picking up on the fact that they don't, I'll start with community foundations in general. Their KPIs, although they wouldn't call them key performance indicators, have things improved year over year. Are there fewer homeless people? Are there more children educated? Is the air cleaner? Is the water cleaner? Is public safety up, not down? And how do I know that that's actually happening? Well, you don't know if that's actually happening unless someone is covering it. And you don't know, you can't raise awareness on those topics unless someone is covering it. So our primary cohort of funders are family and place-based funders, not the big national ones. The ones who are right in your hometown, and you probably don't know them because 75–80% of those funders don't have a staff. It's generally a family foundation having a dinner conversation. That's what their board meetings look like. And they've been spending money for years and years on postcards of polar bears to try to raise awareness about climate, for instance. But have found through us that daily coverage of climate, which is a global issue, but when you make it so local that it's about, say, your condominium is arguing over solar cells on the roof, that makes a global issue local.
Right.
And funders are beginning to realize that that is a vehicle for them to raise awareness. And at the end of that relationship is the newsroom, but ultimately it's the community that's made better. I was on a quarterly report just yesterday with a climate reporter in Greenville, South Carolina, who has produced 38 stories about climate and the environment in the last quarter.
Wow.
And, you know, and reaching thousands and thousands of people. And for most funders, that's like walking on the moon. You
Yes.
know, that's a tangible impact that they can take to their board or their sister, and say, look, this has been money well invested.
Yeah. So it seems like a beautiful marriage, right? So we have, this need for additional funding to fund, good quality journalism. And then we have these place and family-based
Mm.
uh, funding outfits that need an opportunity to expand their work, amplify their work, do better work, whatever you want to call it. And
Hmm.
Journalism Funding Partners is working to bring those two things together for really, and I hate this phrase, but the whole win-win, right? I mean, everybody
Right. Yeah.
everybody is benefiting from this
Right.
kind of really creative way to pair two things that have not been paired
Right.
till very, very, very recently.
Yeah, I like to say when introducing what we do, the nuts and bolts of what we do, I say, if I'm clinical about it, we're middlemen.
Yeah.
But if I'm romantic about it, we're matchmakers.
Yes.
And that's what we do.
Mhm.
And our job is to make sure that the funders see the value of their investment and that they get the terms of a grant that says that over the course of the year you're going to do 52 or more stories on climate. And on the news side, they need to be comforted and have someone in the middle to make sure that there is no attempt to interfere,
Mhm.
that their editorial integrity and independence remain secure.
Mhm.
And I'm the wall. JFP is the wall for both sides to make sure that both sides get what they want. Since I brought it up, though, our research has shown, and I think we'll talk about that, but one of the things our research found was that the funders are as adamant about editorial independence as the newsrooms are.
That's amazing.
I had one funder tell me, she said, the smallest widget we make is a beat. That's it. We don't tell you what the color of the beat is, what metal it's made out of, which way it turns. That's the smallest widget we make. How it animates itself is up to the newsroom.
Mhm.
And that should be good news to news organizations, because as you can imagine, that's always the first question.
Well, and it definitely is on my list of questions. So that's a beautiful segue. And to be honest with you, I think not only is that a question for obviously the practicing journalist, but also for the public, right? Because
Right.
I have to admit, as a media consumer, when I first heard about this model, that was my first concern. True story.
Sure.
I thought,
Hmm.
oh goodness, because being a public relations professor, I have a lot of experience with dealing with nonprofit organizations and have witnessed, the various challenges with different donors and different things. And of course, sometimes it's a beautiful marriage, and sometimes it's not so much. And there is definitely something to having those conversations. And
Hmm.
I actually love that you use the word wall. Um,
Hmm.
when I used to talk about it in my media ethics class, I used to talk about it like a moat with,
Uh-huh.
piranhas and snapping crocodiles, and just wanting to make the separation so clear, and no one could ever cross it, and all of that between advertisers and
Hmm.
reporters. And this is the exact same issue. And what I really like people to understand the public to understand is that journalists have been dealing with this forever because they've
Hmm.
always had advertisers and they've always worked on this wall. This is no different. And I
Hmm.
thinking that this isn't new gives people a lot more peace. Have you talked about it in that way or found that to be true?
Yes, yeah. That with consumers, in fact, part of our research found that consumers had a neutral to positive opinion about funded journalism, more so than they had for commercial funded media. For the reason that you said, my wife was the executive editor in Sarasota, Florida, at the Herald Tribune, and every year she had to have lunch with the biggest car dealer in town so he could tell her how she should do her job. And that was Senator Vern Buchanan,
Yeah.
and so that we've
That's
been
hard.
dealing with that forever.
Hmm.
Someone trying to tell us how to do our job is almost as common as it used to be when we all worked in newsrooms that had the old style telephones. Getting a random phone call with, "I got a Pulitzer Prize winning story for you," and you're like, "Yeah."
I bet you do.
That's so cute of you. That's
I know. How adorable. Yes. So what it sounds like you're saying is that when those relationships are formed between the newsroom and the funder, that those conversations are had at the beginning, at that and that there's just extreme clarity. So my assumption is that makes it a non-issue. Has that been your
it,
experience?
yeah, it makes it a non-issue because we make it a contract.
Great.
And so it's a contract that, the funder has with us
Mhm.
that here's what again, I'll use climate. I want a climate reporter in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I want them to cover all aspects of climate and
Mhm.
make it local. And want maybe this many stories per year. And here's the contact on our side, and here's the contact at JFP, and that's how we're going to govern it. Then JFP has a contract with the newsrooms
Mhm.
that says we'll act as fiscal sponsor on this. Here's how we'll do reporting, and we'll do quarterly reporting so that the funder knows that you're performing. You will keep track of the finances. If the funder wants it, you will have at the base of every story or somewhere in your news segment on air that this is brought to you by funding through JFP from X, Y, and Z funders. So
Okay.
there's transparency and all that. And I merged those two agreements so that they are basically welded together.
Mhm.
So we stand at the point that seam of the weld and hold all of that together so that both sides are kept honest.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And so kind of taking a little bit of a few steps backward. So do
Mhm.
you find that does the origin of these relationships sort of come from both sides, or is it mostly y'all work with funders that have a need and then find a match with the newsroom, or does sometimes the newsroom have a need and you find a match with the funder? Is it both ways or kind of
It's
more one?
both. It's
Okay.
really both. I mean, both in the course of a day.
Okay.
That I'll have a conversation with. We recently, I worked with a funder on the Space Coast of Florida.
Mhm.
This conversation began while we were both changing planes in Atlanta.
Oh, wow.
And she asked what I did, and I told her, and she was the head of a health foundation in the Space Coast. And I said, "That's great. What are your priorities?" And she said, "Mental health index is high. And we've seen that creep up every year as one of the biggest concerns in the community is its mental health." And I said, "That's wonderful. Have you ever thought about funding a mental health reporter at one of the news outlets in your area?" And she said she had never thought about that. And so that 6 months later, there's a mental health reporter at Florida Today, just started 4 weeks ago.
Love.
And on the newsroom side, I just had a call this morning with a small newspaper in Vermont that is interested in us. I explained how we work, that we don't do general funds, we don't do operations. We fund a specific beat or a specific desk, an area of coverage. And if you wanted to start, we could start with community funding, where you have a site attached to your site that says we're raising money to hire a housing reporter in this area of Vermont. Please help us.
Mhm.
And that starts the conversation with the larger donors. So the folks who want to give $25 are seen by the people who have donor advised funds through Schwab or Fidelity or anything like that. And then they start giving at the $1,000 level. And then you have a community foundation that says, "Oh, I didn't know that this was an avenue we could take. We would like to fund this specific beat." So every day it's coming from all sides. And increasingly so, because as you said, as when I started 3 years ago, we were probably 2 years into news organizations beyond public media doing this at all. So it was fairly novel. It is becoming maybe not yet integral, but a lot of organizations are seeing it as something that they need to do the same way they need to do reader revenue and advertising and events and other things. That philanthropically funded journalism is how we get a mental health reporter in the Space Coast.
Right. Reader revenue, my interpretation of that is subscriptions, or am I?
Subscriptions or membership. Yeah.
Okay, great. I
Yeah.
just for our
No.
viewers and listeners, just want to make sure I was correct. And thank you.
Every industry has its buzzwords and its names, and oh my gosh, I don't know how people in government can make heads or tails of all those acronyms.
Yeah, or education.
Or education.
Oh my goodness. So is it a correct assumption that a lot of what you also do in addition to the matchmaking is educating people that this is a thing? I would
Yeah,
that
yeah.
spreading the word, especially because, this journalism funding partners is not that old, and this is still a relatively new idea. Is that true? Do you have to spend a lot of time, or are you planning on just being an evangelist about this idea?
I kind of am an evangelist about it, and that starts on both ends of that conversation, the funder and the newsroom. There's a lot of education that goes into both ends of that. You know, the newsroom wants to know, what is this? Are they going to get in my business? What is this? It took me a full year to convince a corporately owned news organization's corporate office to allow them to hire a reporter that was fully funded.
Wow.
And because they just couldn't wrap their mind around it. So we just had conversation after conversation after conversation. And on the funder side, I mentioned the Space Coast. I had several conversations virtual like this with their entire board where they would ask questions of, well, what if they write a story that we don't like?
Yeah.
And I said, then they wrote a story that you didn't like. That's kind of how that went.
Mhm.
And it was like, well, and I said, yeah, if when you fund into journalism, you are not funding a PR firm for you. Because awareness of these issues is, if you're a good beat reporter, you really animate that beat. And after 6 months, you begin to see the world through that beat, that everything in your life becomes, I can do a story because that's on my beat,
Yep.
you know? And so that's the beauty of journalism, is that's the way we're wired. And that's good for the funders, because that means that the journalist is not writing the same story every day. You know, I mentioned North Carolina and climate. You could write about the Outer Banks disappearing every day, because it's disappearing every day.
Right.
But I've yet to meet the person who wants to read 50 stories in a year about that. They do want to have to understand the depth and breadth of climate change, and environmental stories. You know, it's about electric school buses. It's about those solar cells on the roof. It's about PFAS. It's about chicken farms infesting the state of North Carolina that are unregulated. And that's what the beauty of journalism is we really start to see the world through that lens, and everything you just want to add on to it.
Right. Absolutely. So is there do you have a model where, and I think you answered this, but I just want to clarify that the funding part or the funder funds something other than a particular position? You mentioned the word desk, which I think is probably still synonymous with a human. Um,
Mhm.
do you have any examples where they fund something other than a specific reporter on a specific beat?
They, I have, yes.
Okay.
I have, when I mentioned desk, the investigative desk at the Miami Herald that
Oh,
won the Pulitzer for the condo collapse is funded through us.
oh, wow. Okay. So,
So that's a collective.
okay.
We're working with Tangle right now, which is a podcast, and they're looking to move into video and some social media reach to help expand into younger viewers. And that's something that we're helping them with. But 85-90% of the time, it is an individual beat.
Yeah. Which, I mean, makes the most sense, right? And it
Mhm, mhm.
feels very logical that that's where you've had really good success, clear definitions, clear scope, clear lines, and everybody just it's a lot easier, I would imagine, to be on the same.
Yes.
with that.
And a lot easier to manage because the metrics are pretty clear there. You have this many stories, and then you can also talk about your social reach, your how many people you reached on in your various platforms, and also if you landed a white whale.
Hmm.
And for me, the white as a journalist, the white whale is not the awards, but one of our funded reporters just won a Green Eye Shade Award, and those are always very nice. But the white whale to me is, um, did this change policy? Did this lead to actual change in our our community? One of the things I'm proudest of as a journalist is that when we did a series about methamphetamine in California's Central Valley in the early 1990s, it was cited when they put into law that you couldn't buy every ingredient to make methamphetamine by walking in as someone, as I did, into farming stores and whatnot. And it doesn't look it now, but I was in my late 20s and I had fiery red hair and looked like Opie Taylor. And if you would sell me the ingredients to build methamphetamine, then we got a problem here.
Yeah.
And funders love to hear those stories, even though they're few.
Right.
One of our climate reporters in North Carolina won 4 national awards for his coverage on the spread of chicken farming in the state.
Mhm.
Um, but he didn't win the one that we don't name, much like actors don't name Hamlet. But he was very close, though.
Oh, I love it. Well, and he hasn't retired yet, so
No, he has not. He has not.
there is still an opportunity, right? It's
Mhm.
just like when someone's about to get a no-hitter, right? You just
Right. Yeah.
talk about
You don't sit next to them. You don't say it. Even the broadcasters know not to say it.
Nope, nope, totally understand that.
And I say that as a guy with a baseball on my desk every
There we
day.
go. Oh my goodness. So a minute ago you mentioned, sort of the myriad of revenue that is
Mhm.
really it feels to me like when you mentioned that it's your belief that there needs to be in order to do this now, right? In order to ensure journalism's future, there needs to be multiple revenue streams. And can you talk a little bit about that and your experience as a consultant with the different companies and what I guess what types are have been more advantageous and I don't know, just talk a little bit about that.
Sure, sure. And I also I'm in Gainesville, Florida, and often guest lecture for at UF, and one of the classes I do is Business and Future of Journalism, and the business angle of it, which is something that most journalism schools neglect to inform journalists about. Is all the ways you can make money. You need to make money for a journalist, and I always start those conversations by saying I prefer a four-legged stool over any other kind of stool. A two-legged stool is unstable, and a three-legged stool is not a stool if one of the legs breaks. A four-legged stool, you have support coming from the all four quadrants. So when I look at like public radio has membership, they have underwriting, which is the softer version of advertising. They have events, and they have major giving, which is, major donors in your market who want you to succeed. If you're lucky enough to be the public radio station in St. Louis, Emmy Pulitzer, her family used to own all the newspapers in the area, is a huge donor to that station. And so those are its four legs of its stool. If you are a for-profit digital news organization, you're going to look at advertising.
Mm,
You're going to look at some form of reader revenue, whether you want to do subscriptions or membership. You're going to look at programmatic advertising, which flows in. It's just part of the ecosystem. It's why ads follow you when you abandon something in a cart, a
mm,
shopping cart. And then, insert something here. I mean, some do events, some do a lot of of get-together things where they celebrate local nurses and things like that. And philanthropy can be one of those as well. And that's what, and if you're on air, you have advertising, you don't have reader revenue, but you do have retransmission fees for when they're taken out until those go away. And every year they're threatened to go away. You have some amount of network fees coming in, and then you also have events or things like that. But now you can also have philanthropy be one of those sources. It's not a source of profit. It's a source for operation of continuing your mission, and not cover the giants.
Right, right. So two questions. I want to ask about events, but before that, subscription versus membership. Pros, cons, one work better than the other.
Subscriptions are traditional on the for-profit side, and becoming more traditional now than they ever were. I mean, if you can go a day without seeing a commercial for some app or service that will help you unsubscribe from things, good for you because you're leading a better life than I am. I see them all the time. So those are subscriptions are strong like that because they are ongoing like
Uh-huh.
that, and they are a contract. That's a contract between you and the news organization as a user. You are paying them for this service, and so you can hold them accountable to that service. That's why newspapers are so vocal when they don't make it off the press,
Mhm.
and why people get so upset when they cut back from 7 days to 5 to 3, right? Because they thought this is not what I was paying for. Membership is softer than that, and always works if you have a sense of belonging. And not because you get a tote bag. You feel like you are doing something that is promoting something in the community that you want to have there. You're a member of a museum. You're a member of a zoo. You're a member of a park or a garden. You're a member of a public radio station, and there's a sense of belonging. There's been a lot of experimenting with member exclusivity that at this tier you get this service or anything like that. And I'll piss off some people with this one, but all of the research says that doesn't matter to people who want to be members. They're just going to give it the level that they feel comfortable giving. And then it's your job as an organization to ask them to give just a little bit more. That's why if you've ever given to any political party or candidate, you're going to hear from all of their friends
Right.
very quickly
Mhm.
because they want you to give a little bit more. So it's a distinction that we make in the industry that I don't think most people make. They just don't see it. Am I a member of Spotify? Am I a member of Apple Music? Or am I a subscriber to Apple Music? I just have Apple Music, and I
Right.
pay a monthly fee for it.
That's interesting. I really appreciate the nuance between those two. Do for-profit news organizations utilize the membership idea at all? That's not something that I'm necessarily familiar with, but obviously you are on the inside. So,
They've toyed with it.
okay.
They've played with it. And they've tried to do it around those areas of member exclusivity and access, which is what I tell classes when I'm talking about membership. The real tote bag
Mhm.
of membership is not a tote bag. It's not, that you're going to be able to come as a member. You get to come to the public radio event where they bring in one of the NPR announcers for a speech
Right.
or something like that. The real tote bag in membership is access.
Mhm.
That journalists have access to people, and people talk to journalists, and the people who talk to journalists don't talk to real people. If you get me.
Yeah.
If if I call the mayor as a reporter, the mayor is either going to call me back or not, and either way, that goes in my story.
True.
And if my mother called the mayor, nothing would happen,
Right.
right? And the more we lean in as journalists into our access being one of our superpowers,
Yes.
that then we can really understand what we can do with membership and with getting closer to our community. I believe that journalists inherently have three superpowers. One of them is, I just mentioned, access, uh, and the other one is distribution. We have audience.
Mhm.
But the real superpower of a journalist is that we can take disparate pieces of information and weave them into a cohesive narrative that is understandable by insiders and outsiders alike.
Mhm.
That is not a native skill in human beings.
Mhm.
So when I talk to colleagues who have been laid off and they worry about what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? And I say, you have this skill.
Mhm.
Not everyone has this skill.
Right.
It's like people who are good at public speaking, people who are afraid of public speaking, look at those people like they're gods.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you do that? And journalists just need to own that
Yeah.
is as their superpower.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. And I think there's a lot there that can be explored in this discussion about the future of journalism. It feels like there's some opportunities there that are mostly untapped and at worst need to be amplified. So that's fun. So the event side of it. So
Hmm, hmm.
I might when you said that, I thought revenue generating. So I can understand the events from the perspective of community building and relationship building and all of that and donor relations and
Hmm.
all of that makes sense, completely makes sense for me. Um, but revenue, like, is it a significant enough revenue generator, or is the primary driver for events those other things, right? The relationship building and all of that. Can you talk me through that? Because I'm
Yeah.
wondering if I'm missing something or
No, it's a timely question because next week my wife and I are going to Austin, Texas for the Texas Tribune Festival.
ooh, that
The
sounds
Texas
fun.
the Texas Tribune Festival is a multi-day event that brings in people in politics, people in it's kind of like the South by Southwest for people in media and politics and policy, and they do it every year,
Okay.
um, and it accounts for a third of their overall revenue.
Okay, stand corrected officially.
Yeah.
Officially corrected. Thank you. That's why I asked because I normally am wrong. Okay.
Yeah. And we're going, I'm going because my wife is speaking at it, and
Great.
my job is just to be arm candy for those 3 days.
Well, you will have a blast doing that. That'll be great. Yay. Okay. Well, all right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. There's not, again, a perhaps an untapped opportunity for other markets, though, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, very much so. But the key is to find, Texas Tribune cover has great coverage, has great relationships, and very well respected on both sides of the aisle, can bring in the Nancy Pelosi's to speak, and bring in the former communications director from the White House. They can bring in all of these people and then sell a lot of underwriting advertising because you want to be in the program, you want to be on the wall, you want to say this, the dais is brought to you by X, Y, and Z. But you have to find that hook. That works in Texas because people love to talk about politics and argue about politics, and it's a state sport. You just have to find out know what the state sport is in your area.
Right.
If I owned the newspaper in Asheville, North Carolina, it would absolutely be a craft beer fest that had bluegrass music and folk music. And then that would attract people from all over the place.
Mhm.
And I know this because my wife went there with one of her best friends a few weeks ago, and that's why ads for the Biltmore are still following me around all of my digital channels because she did a bit of research and it thinks we're going back to Biltmore tomorrow.
There we go. There we go. Oh my gosh, I love it. Oh, this is just so much food for thought, which again was the whole idea.
Yes.
So, opportunity for you to share, do a little ad. So, if a news organization or a
So
community funder would like to connect with the journalism funding partners, what would be the first step for either party?
the first step would be a conversation, initiating the conversation. It's very easy to access us through our website, jfp-local.org. And we have a contact us page that goes to all of us on staff, and we could see that. And then we initiate through an email back if it looks like it's going to be a fit, or a no thank you if it's not. And I'll talk about what's not a fit in a second. But then it all starts with a conversation. We're not an organization that you're going to really get up underneath from a pitch deck.
Okay.
I worked with when I worked with the local media consortium as its director. We would have runway sessions where we would allow new tech companies to come in and pitch us.
Okay.
And so they would, so over the course of the day, you'd get 7 pitches of different everything from take this photo on your phone and turn it into a postcard that you could send your mother, or to here's a new way to sort recruitment advertising and all that. And I got after you do 2 days of that with 7 in a row and 7 in a row, I at least people like with my brain have to find ways to entertain ourselves. And so what I would do is count. And what I counted was how many slides it would be before they got to the hockey stick slide that, shows, and then there's profit, you know. And the correct answer is 7, the average
There we
over
go.
the course of
You
several
heard
of
it
those
here
days.
first, folks. Okay.
Yeah, it's always the 7th slide. But you're
Well,
not going to get to know us from our 7th slide. You're
okay.
going to get to know it by you asking me questions about how does this work, me letting you know that you're not the first one to ask that question. That happens a lot with the funding side. They don't want to be too far out on a limb.
Mhm.
And knowing that there are multiple other funders that are doing this that look just like them is reassuring. It's also helpful to us because funders, like every industry, they all talk to each other and they all talk about the same things that we all talk about. It's like, what's working for you?
Right.
And if they find something that's working for another one, there's a bit of FOMO,
Mhm.
and I love the FOMO. I'll take it all day.
Yep,
So it
absolutely.
just starts with a conversation with us, and that's a third of my day really, is having those conversations, whether they're coming from the funder side or the news side.
Okay. So you did mention the things that wouldn't be a good match. I do want to let our folks know about that. So what are the things that don't quite work?
Well, from the funder side, when there is an apparent agenda
Okay.
for the funding, that they want to make something smaller than a widget. They really want to tell you that it's copper, not brass. They're not right for us. And there are plenty of avenues for those axe grinding types of organizations. And it ain't me. And on the news side is if you're coming in fact, we just I told someone that they weren't a fit for us because what they really wanted was to raise money so they could hire a salesperson.
Um,
And said, I did not say this on the call, but I will on this one. I said, I would say that's called adulting. You know,
yeah.
if you want to run a business, and you're not thinking about how you're going to make money as much as you're thinking about what your content array is going to be, then you're not a serious person
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah.
You're maybe just starting something on a whim that is going to get out from under you once it has audience, and then you're going to realize that you need to sustain it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else that you would like to add about anything we've talked about or something we haven't talked about under the auspices of the future of journalism?
Yes. Well, I would like to introduce my dog, Ernie Pyle,
Well,
who's
hello
made
there,
his
sir.
his uh, his his, his entrance. He's 13 and living his best life, but still working a shift. I think what I would say is that, the future of journalism is going to include philanthropy as one of its legs on its stool. And that's just going to happen. And it's happening organically. And if you don't understand from a newsroom how to navigate that, then you can give me a call and we'll talk about that. But it's really going to be a piece of the future, because a lot of these beats that we're talking about, as I mentioned earlier, they never made the cash register jingle, but they are integral to the safety and the livability of our communities. And philanthropy exists to come to the rescue in market corrections. Think about how many think about art and art museums. Show me a self-sustaining art museum, and I'll show you a great gift store. That's what they have. Um, but we don't support the arts by just buying a poster of Monet. I
Mhm.
mean, we want there to be Monet in our life,
Yeah.
and what our job at JFP is to convince people that if you care about education, you care about local news. If you care about public safety, you care about local news. If you care about preventing elder abuse, you care about local news. You just have a preamble to it. And to the newsrooms, I say, you need to be comfortable with something I'm going to say that'll make you want to punch me, is that sometimes journalism is a means to an end. And from a funder perspective, journalism is a means to an end. We
Mhm.
want to raise awareness of early childhood reading, and you're going to write stories about that, and that's going to raise awareness. Um, that's not just a win-win. That's again being an adult about where you are as and what you really serve as a journalist. That's why I have absolutely no patience. In fact, I throw up a little bit in my mouth when people talk about saving local news.
Mm.
Local news is going to be around as long as people talk to each other, text each other, write stories about it, create story, tell stories there as lore. It'll survive in some form or another. Um, what needs to happen is we have to, as journalists, figure out how to sustain it, not to save it. And one of the ways that we can sustain it is by inviting in philanthropy, by saying, we are a vehicle
Mhm.
that will help you accomplish your goals. You're not saving my business model. I'm helping you solve your goals.
Right. Oh, wow. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Again, so much food for thought. Rusty, so grateful for your time. Thank you and your insight. I know you have given our folks just so much to think about and hopefully try, right? Because we do
Mhm.
want action as a result of this podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a mentor a long time ago say, after we had a big brainstorming meeting with the staff, and everyone's throwing out all these ideas, and we're going to do this and we can do that. And at the end of it, he hadn't said anything through the meeting. He said, "It's easy to say words." And I just thought, yeah, a lot of times people just talk and talk and talk, and then they don't do anything. And that's why I love what we do at JFP, because it's what we do that has people talk about it. It's not us putting a billboard up or buying a lot of ad space or anything like that. It's what you have done that defines your character,
Mhm.
not what you say about yourself.
Without question. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. You're invited to tune in next time for another episode of Exploring Journalism's Future, a podcast powered by the Institute for Media and Public Trust at Fresno State. Until then, keep the faith, and for the love of democracy, please join us in this crucial conversation. Take care.